Landscape photography is much more than taking beautiful postcard-like images. To me, it is a direct observation of the state of the world that we are living in. Today I'm in this beautiful nature reserve outside of Saigon, like some waterfall and beautiful trees. And I'd like to invite you to show you how I take images in this setting. So when doing landscape photography, it's really important to scout the area first. To me here, that's quite interesting because I've never been here before. So I will have to, or I already did spend some time walking around the area and like figure out some spots that are really nice to take images of. The second thing is that landscape photography can become quite technical because we want to make sure that everything is in focus. Sometimes we might want to work with a shallow depth of field as well. Overall, it's really important in landscape photography to understand the technical aspects of what you're doing to tell the story of the landscape that you're portraying. A tripod is also really important when doing landscape photography, especially if you work with long exposures, so you can carefully frame the scenery that you're working with. Of course, there are many different lenses that you can use in landscape photography, but I think very important for this is a wide angle lens, because like the landscape, the nature is usually quite vast. So I would start with a wide angle lens and then probably for some shots get a little bit narrower, but I think wide angle is key here. I found a little waterfall here in the forest right over there. And what I want to do is I will use a tripod and a long exposure. So right now I shoot at 1/3 of a second at f9. And what I will do is I will go through a few different options. So I will go through smaller aperture, like I will go up to f like 22. And then I will change the exposure time accordingly. So I start now with f22 and 3-second exposure. And now I'm gonna go to f16 and 1-second exposure. I go for f8 and 1/2 second exposure roughly. It still blurs the water, but we will see that like the depth of field and everything is changing. And now I'm going to f5.6, and for that I'm gonna have a 1/13 of a second exposure. And then the smallest aperture, or like the widest open one I have on this lens, is f4. I'm gonna have a 20th of a second exposure, which still blurs the water a bit. And we still see a tiny bit of motion blur, but not much at all. And later, if we compare these images, we can see all these differences. Okay, that's my first landscape shot. Cool. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna ditch the tripod for the bit. I keep my wide angle lens on and like I'm gonna hike a little bit further into the jungle. All right, let's go. Just like wrapping up the tripod and then move ahead. All right, this will require quite some post-production later because the challenge here is that now it's a little bit sunny, which of course is nice, but if you shoot in the forest, that can be a little bit tricky because we get these speckles of light coming through, right? And that means we will have areas on the forest floor that are very brightly exposed and other parts are dark. So in order to deal with this, I expose slightly under, like the camera measurement, so maybe 1/2 stop under or something like that. That means later I can try to get out the details of the bright areas and still also increase the shadows. One thing always is important, if we overexpose on a digital camera, it's very, very difficult to get the details back. If we underexpose, there's always something we can drag out of the shadows. All right, just let's have a look. Try to focus on the tree bark actually in front of me. So again, we can imagine some perception of depth of the forest later. And over here we have a gigantic tree root, which I think also will be very, very beautiful for close-up. You see me next to this tree and you can now see how huge this tree root in fact is. If you want to capture that in a photo, you actually might need to place a person in the frame to show that comparison. It's also just a beautiful imagery, like to have the trees submerged in the water and things like that again. Like some beautiful entangled roots here. So again, actually similar to doing street photography, also nature photography, I like to just go very slowly. Like you see, I'm not running through the forest. I take my time and I look around. because there are so many things that we could be able to capture. So it's all about your observation. Actually, take your time, shoot a lot. I just discovered this beautiful little spider like running around on one of the tables here, and I just figured let's try to get a few macro shots of it. Yes. We never know what will happen on the shoot, so it's always great to be ready and take some extra shots that are outside of what you planned. Like this is like one of the really nice experiences in photography. Cool.